Hello, and welcome to Roopa's Six Questions for Authors. It's an absolute pleasure for me to invite Kaihan Krippendorff to today's edition of Six Questions. Hi, Kaihan.
Hi, Roopa. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Kaihan's old friend, I want to say, and certainly colleague. And he's the former McKinsey consultant and a six-time best-selling author of books that include Outthink the Competition, Driving Innovation from Within, and Proximity. Kaihan is recognized by Thinkers 50 and Global Gurus as one of the top 20 global management thinkers in strategy and innovation, and I'm very fortunate to call him a friend. I am Roopa Unikrishnan, and as some of you know, I am a Chief Strategy and Innovation Officer by day, and by night, I'm an author of business books and now crime fiction. And I was inspired by the questions I got when I went out, talking about my multiple books. And I thought it would be interesting to ask some of those questions to my author friends. And that's what brings us here today. But before we get started, Kaihan, tell us a little bit about you and your books.
Yeah, my books are all in the area of business and strategy and innovation. A lot of them come from ancient roots. That's sort of when I was a kid, I was really into martial arts and Zen and the art of motorcycle maintenance and studied Taoism and things like that. And so, kind of art of war-ish, let's say. And so it all kind of like has that root. But my books are all on topics that I think are important that the world needs to hear about. And I spend a good deal of time doing the research to kind of bring it together in a practical format for people to use the knowledge.
Yep. Yep. And certainly been driving the Outthinkers group, which is the group I'm fortunate to be part of, and
Yes.
engaging in the most productive way. So thank you, Kaihan.
Yeah.
Well, let's get started. I have my six questions. My first one, I call it the origin spark. Every author, every writer has that first idea, the one that made him think, I have to write this. So I think you're telling us a little bit about your history helps, but what was that first idea? And did that one actually become the book?
Yeah, I would say the first idea came before I even thought I would write a book. I was living in the Dominican Republic with my wife living in Philadelphia, and I would fly often through Miami to the Dominican Republic. And on a layover, I went to a Borders bookstore. I don't think they exist anymore. And I found a translation of the first 18 of a set of Chinese stratagems called the 36 stratagems. And as I said at the time, I was very into anything Asian philosophy, East Asian philosophy, let's say.
Yeah.
Although I do like Kautilya and other Southern Asian philosophers,
Right.
and I found it, and it just so happened I was living in the Dominican Republic. I didn't have many friends. I had a lot of time on my hands. This was before Wi-Fi. This is like dial-up internet. I had dial-up internet at my work, and so and not at home, and so on the weekends, because I had very little to do, I'd go to the office and I would log on and I would search online for stories. And I created a Word document with footnotes and just took story after story after story and classified it according to these 36 patterns.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I wasn't writing a book. I was just sort of entertaining myself, you know?
Right.
And I think the moment that I realized it was a book is that after that, I went to business school at Columbia. And in my second year, I was doing an independent study with a professor. I wanted to continue doing the work, and her name's Catherine Harrigan. And she said, "Oh, you're writing a book." And that was the moment that implanted in my head that, oh, I could be writing right now. You have to know that I also lived for a year in Holland when I was 10 years old. And when I came back, I was in fourth grade with second grade English skills. And from that point on, I always thought of myself as not good at English, but
Mm.
good at math. And so the idea that I could write a book was foreign to me, but I was at the time carrying around a thesaurus, and I put myself into the newspaper club. I know I'm giving you a much longer answer than you're asking
No,
for.
no, I love
It's a
it.
confluence of all of those things, being bored, having this interest, finding this thing, being on the journey of maybe I could be good at writing, even though I've always known myself to be good at math and not writing. And then having this teacher say, oh, you're writing a book. That all came together. Then I buy a book called The Complete Idiot's Guide to Getting Published. And then I just execute that chapter by chapter by chapter. And 7 years later, the book is published.
Amazing, amazing. And it is so interesting to the role that some of our formative our teachers play. I still remember the person who took my first poem and said, we've got to send it in for a competition, and the rest is history. So, it's
Yes,
interesting.
yes. I think that's so important. I think, and one of the book that you shared that you're working on now about kind of leaders creating the future. I think it's so
Yeah,
powerful because when you say, oh, let's send it in. Oh, you're writing a book. You're not predicting the future. You're creating the future, and
that's right.
creating the future for other people is very powerful.
No, it's amazing. And the second question I have is, it's called the process ritual, and you've kind of talked about that, the Idiot's Guide, but walk me through what writing actually looks like for you on a typical day now, right? Not the romanticized, put on your writing jacket version, but what is it really like? And be as honest as you can be, because part of what I like to do is to make sure that I run into a lot of people who sort of say, I just don't have the 5 hours a day to write. And I'm like, that's not how books get written.
That's not how. Yes, I got you. Yes. Yeah, I will say that I'll describe the way I write now.
Mhm.
It's different than I when I wrote my first book. My first literary agent, she said, "You only get to write one book." Because that's the book where you're not under deadline and
Uh,
you're doing it for yourself. And then afterwards, now you have a contract and you're like producing, right?
right.
So I'm in production mode. But I think the key is Will
Right.
Smith tells the story of his dad made him and his brother every day after school build a wall.
Oh,
And they were built, it took them a whole year to build this brick wall. And every day they'd go build a wall. The point was not to build a wall. The point was to appreciate how brick by brick by brick you can build something. And so that's how I write, is every week I write a newsletter that's about 700 to 1,000 words.
hmm.
And I also 3 times a week I'll do a TikTok video, and I will have short scripts, and I just pick topics that are interesting, but there is a theme that I still start coming together with. And
Hmm.
these pieces of content become my shoebox of material,
Right.
much like a comedian is constantly looking for material and writing notes, and they're building their materials, right? And then I will practice it on stage, speaking it, and I see kind of what works. And then when it comes to actually writing the book, I start pulling those things together. uh, at that point, a framework appears. I start bundling them together, and sometimes it spells some acronym. And then I take them and I take those bricks and I stack them together, and I put the transitions in, which is the mortar,
Hmm.
and that becomes the book.
Amazing. That's such a fascinating way. And so this is almost like emergent stories, right? Emergent
Yes.
books.
But
Amazing.
yes, my first 2 books were the opposite. I had a Chinese framework of these 36 things. In
Yeah.
my second book, I had a Chinese framework of these 5 things. And I started with the framework and then filled it in, but everything else has been emergent.
Fabulous,
Yeah.
fabulous. So talk to me about the day job tension, right? I mean, in your case, they're all in the same space, but writing and your professional life exists in the same brain. What has writing done for your career, and the other way around? How is your career sort of fed your writing, or has there been conflict?
Mhm. Yes. Um, I waited tables in college, and my manager gave me this advice once. He said, never go into the kitchen empty-handed. And what he meant was never go into the kitchen if you have an empty hand. See if there's something you can bring into the kitchen. If you're in the kitchen, you're coming out and you have an empty hand, see if there's something you can serve, right? So
Right.
I'm always trying to double up. And so I have been lucky that I have been able to engineer or pick my career so that I have this symbiosis.
Hmm.
I'm able to leverage. You know what I mean?
Right.
So when I was at McKinsey, we had to do, for example, we had to do a presentation training. And the presentation training could be on anything that you wanted. And everyone else was doing whatever, telecom, whatever. And I decided to do my book. So I looked for those opportunities to overlap. I mean, now I think I'm maybe not a good case because my writing is my work.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so I give speeches, and very early on, I got to interact with Jim Collins, and I texted him and asked him his advice and how does he manage his time. And he said he thinks of himself as a professor without an academic appointment,
Hmm.
and his speaking is his teaching, and his
Right.
book writing is his research. And so that's kind of how I that's how I work.
Yeah.
And being around the outthinker strategy officers,
Yep.
of which you're one of our founding members, um, it gives me a chance every month to just be in conversations with smart people
Right.
about interesting topics, which then becomes topics that I'll write about in the newsletter, and then maybe do TikToks, and then that becomes a book. So it's kind of a flow.
Right. Right. I can see that, and I can see how in the early days there may have been more of a tension, and now I think you've really made it part of the process, right? Um, so question number four, I call it the abandoned idea. Was there ever a book that you started, maybe even got deep into, and then had to walk away? What was it? And more importantly, what does it say that you did that?
Yeah. I was, I think there's a book that I've walked away from. There's a book that I haven't yet walked away from that I'm going to write eventually. So I do want to write. I'm intrigued by writing a fiction book, and you being someone who's written both fiction and nonfiction, maybe you would agree. I don't know, but for me, fiction is much harder
This.
than
Yeah.
nonfiction. So I started a fiction book, but I abandoned that. The book that I have not abandoned, but it's been many, many, many years. I call it The Fourth Option. I kind of want to write a book that would be like a kind of like a Mel Robbins 6 second rule kind of
Hmm.
thing. And when I give my speeches, this idea of this fourth option, that there's three obvious options, and we get attracted to those. And so when we see that we are kind of narrowing, stop and ask, is there a better way?
I like that.
Is there,
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think that, like, I talk about within business, but I think it's a career. I think it is diet. It is which parking spot to look for. It is which aisle to go down the grocery line. I think that it applies to life. And so I want to write that book. So I
Mm,
have been taking notes and taking notes. I haven't pulled the trigger on it because I don't feel like I have enough yet.
okay. Are you one of those that it has to be perfect, or you're okay with letting it flow for now?
I think oh, I'm okay. I'm not a perfectionist. I think what it is I'm learning to get more comfortable talking about myself and being personal.
Hmm.
It's much easier to talk about other companies and other people and things like that. But when it's personal, I'm learning to get comfortable with that.
That's right. That's a big, big, big shift. How about so you've got a few books now. I'm sure in the early days it was about like how many did I sell, but what is your shelf test when you finish a book? Do you have an internal sense of whether you've succeeded at what you set out to do? What is in other words, what's your personal measure of success?
So, my favorite book on writing is Stephen Pressfield's The War of Art. And he talks about this first time that he wrote his first book. He was talking to his mentor and how he went through this whole journey, finished it, and he went and had coffee with his mentor. And his mentors, it was like that day he finished. He goes, "Congratulations. Now start writing your next book."
Right.
I find that after I've done with a book, and there's also like this idea of slaying the dragon, like you're fighting at the end, you're like,
Right.
you
Right.
hate this book. You're like, I just want to be done. I do feel like that. I'm like, pierce the dragon, I'm done. And then I'm already working on my next book.
Right.
And so I don't really pay attention to, and this is not necessarily a good thing, I don't really pay attention much to um, the impact the book or how successful the book is.
Right.
I guess the way I realize it is afterwards when I give a speech or it leads to a workshop or and it impacts people like my book Driving Innovation from Within.
Yeah.
Um, the punchline is that 70% of society's most transformative innovations have not come from entrepreneurs, but rather from employees working inside established companies.
Mm,
And that message and that promise is very powerful, and I can prove it. And so I think that is now that book, Outthink the Competition, has sold a lot more than Driving Innovation from Within. Um, but I think it's that impact. Like when I say that on stage or on a workshop, and then people are like, I'm the innovator, that
right.
makes me feel good. Yeah.
That's fabulous. What a great thing to have. So final question. I call it the necessary lie. And I really find that most writers do this, right? They have to maintain a belief about themselves, their process, or their writers that probably isn't entirely true, but kind of is necessary for them to keep going. In my case, for example, I always say my books are for everyone because that's the only way I can write and in a way that is not too, inside baseball, right? And so my aspiration is everyone should be able to read it, but in reality, I think there's a certain type of person who reads either of my, niches. So what is yours? What is your necessary lie?
I think the truth is more helpful than the lie, but I have been convincing myself of a lie for most of my writing career.
Mhm.
Um, which is that I write the books in order to get adoption and to sell books and sell workshops and sell speeches. But that's not what really motivates me. What really motivates me is the idea
Mhm.
and the research and the writing and the bringing of a concept to life.
Right,
Do you know?
right.
And but that said, I think that maybe my lie wasn't the helpful lie. I think maybe the truth is better to
Right,
do what the universe is calling you to do
right.
instead of what you think the market will support.
No, that's though I think maybe initially you needed it to just meet the deadline, right? So
Yeah. And justify why I have this luxury of being able to do this as well,
no,
right?
it's wonderful. Your life is certainly one I would aspire to. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Rupa. Thank you.
Well, to the reader and the viewer, you'll find all about it, Kaihan just below here. Please make sure to click on the link, buy his books. They're really amazing, and then hit follow because there's always other such fabulous conversations going on, and I'd love you all to be part of it. But thank you, Kaihan. Thanks for joining
Thank
us
you, Rupa, for
today.
what you do. Thank you.
Okay.